Hello everyone and welcome back to Football Manager 2020 and a new experiment today where we have swapped the Premier League with the Vanarama National League North. So as you can see on the screen, we are currently looking at the Premier League despite the fact none of the Premier League teams are in here. Instead we have the likes of Boston United, Chester, Darlington and Gateshead fighting for the Premier League title, so we will have a new champion of England this season. The other leagues below them are pretty much the same. I was tempted to switch them all around, but there are two reasons why I didn't. One is the sheer amount of time it takes to do this stuff in the editor. It would have meant that this experiment would have been delayed for quite a while. The second thing is I'm worried that any Premier League team that comes up, if the Championship clubs are just ahead of them, it's just not going to give any real any challenge to the dominance of the Premier League teams when they get back to the top. So I think if we have the likes of, I'm looking at Leeds, Middlesbrough, Blackburn, any of the teams that do have a bit of muscle, stadium, facilities, fans behind them, when they get into the Premier League, they're going to have a 4 or 5 year head start over the big teams like Man City, Arsenal coming up from the lower divisions. It does mean that some of the teams currently in the Premier League might not be able to sustain their title challenge for the long term, but we will keep an eye on that. It'll be much easier to track that now that they'll have to drop through quite a few recognisable leagues before they get to that point. But all of the other leagues are the same. It's only the North that has changed. You can see all the Premier League teams in the same division here. I was tempted to split them between North and South. I think the game might automatically reallocate them anyway in the summer. But the reason I didn't do that was that I wanted to choke as much as possible the flow of Premier League teams back up to the Premier League. So now only 2 teams can escape this division each season, which means it would take 10 full years for them all to get out. And by that point, some of these clubs should be destroyed. You have also in here Farsley and Kings Lynn, so they will probably finish in the bottom 2 this season. There are 22 teams in this league, that's why those 2 are in there. But if you are looking forward to this experiment, do drop a like down below. Make sure to subscribe for the next couple of parts to this experiment and for future experiments along the way, and let me know in the comments if there's anything you would like to see that I do not show you in this episode. But what we're going to do today is just go forward in time. We will probably just go a couple of years at a time. We'll have a slightly more detailed look to begin with, and then we will go much further forward, much more quickly in the next 2 parts. But the other thing to note is that obviously the teams down in the Vanarama National League North will be in the Champions League and Europa League this season, so there will be no none of the non-league teams will be in the Champions League just yet. That hasn't changed, but they will be in the Champions League next season. So let's go forward 1 year in time and see who is crowned the champions of England. Well, we have gone a year into the future, and as you can see, Hereford, of all teams, have been named champions. 1 point clear of York City. They've managed to steal the league by. Very interesting stuff. You can see their reputation still very poor, even though they've qualified for the Champions League now. 5,000 seater stadium, not quite up to scratch. This is going to be a nice big jolt upwards soon. But York, Chester and Boston United joining them in the top 4. Gateshead relegated just by having not won as many games as Kettering Town from the looks of it. But Gloucester and Curzon Ashton also getting relegated. It'll be interesting to see who is in the Europa League. I imagine some of the teams down in the Vanarama National League North have won the domestic competitions, but we will have a look at that soon. Premier League Golden Boot going to McFarlane from York City. Most assists, David Kasumu from Brackley Town, and most man of the matches goes to Waring from Chester. If we just have a quick look at the transfers and sort them by fee, you can see the highest transfer in the Premier League that year was a player leaving. It was Jack Rees going from Telford United to Huddersfield. A bit of an unusual signing, that one. I don't think he's quite good enough for Huddersfield's level, but that may be a sign of how the new reputation for these teams might be impacting the transfer market. But it's also interesting that at the moment there isn't a huge amount of money being spent by the newly promoted team. So Kidderminster Harriers, the biggest spenders, 10th place in the Premier League, they've actually gone out and spent a decent amount of money, 200k, much more than any other team in order to secure their 10th place finish. If we just have a quick look at their landmarks, they've not been taken over by a new team, but they are now rich as a result of their new Premier League finances. It'll be interesting to see how they spend that money that does come in from their new status as well. But if we do drop down to the Championship and have a look at who is likely to be Premier League champions next season, you can see that Fulham have won the Championship only with 89 points, so 11 defeats, a huge number. And then if we look further down, you can see Leeds with 85, West Brom with 81, but Swansea, the team promoted, with 77. So they will be the teams going for the title next season in the Premier League, and hopefully creating a new dominance in the Premier League that can challenge the likes of City and Arsenal and I don't know why I said Arsenal then, but City and Liverpool when they get up to the Premier League. Now, having a look further down, I don't think we need to look at League 1, League 2. Those will just bounce between them as they do normally. But in the Vanarama National League North, if we look at that league table, you can see Manchester City win this title with 105 points. Liverpool have 97. They got promoted in the second position. Manchester United have qualified for the Champions League while being in the Vanarama National League North, so they must have won the Europa League or the Champions League. We'll have a look in a moment. Arsenal in third place qualify for the European Championship as well, so I'm assuming they won the FA Cup. But Manchester City and Liverpool, as you might expect, the two teams making it up to the next level. Newcastle actually finished bottom of the real Premier League, but it's Kings Lynn Town and Farsley that have been relegated out of this league, which is not a surprise. I'd be surprised if any of these Premier League teams actually do get relegated from this league, given that two-place buffer. So if we go over and have a look at the FA Cup next, if it's named the FA Cup, it is. Champions League. Let's have a look at this first. It's popped up first. If we have a look at the semi-final, you can see Liverpool did make the semi-final but lost to Atletico Madrid, so they have not managed to win that. Atletico Madrid going on to win the competition, and in the Europa League, I assume this is Manchester United winning it. You can see they beat Arsenal, and then Roma in the final beaten 2-1, so despite being down in non-league. The other thing we should have a quick look at is the transfers. You can see mostly players leaving. Manchester United did sign Emerson and Joe Lolly, but they're not going to need to spend much money to bring their best players in. You can see Chelsea lost Mason Mount, Alonso and Zuma. Emerson also gone. Manchester City not letting anybody go really, but most of the players still at the club. I'm just having a look if anybody went on a free of major note. It doesn't look like it. So most teams hanging on to their players. If we look at Man City's players, no surprises in here. It's exactly who you would expect to be in there. Sorting by wage, Kevin De Bruyne, Aguero, Sterling. They haven't even gone to other big teams in Europe. That's the interesting thing, and that's because of their reputation. They just are going to be able to hang on to these players because they're still seen as a major club, and they will still be able to attract the best players. Whether they go for the top level ones is a different question. But you can see Sergio Aguero top scoring, but only with 17 goals in 42 matches. Bernardo Silva, Sadio Mane in there as well. Right, if we do have a quick look at the FA Cup, if it's going to come up. Where is the FA Cup? Why has the FA Cup disappeared? There it is, the Emirates FA Cup. You can see Arsenal did win this, which is why they qualified. And then if we drop down, we should be able to go to the Carabao Cup, which was actually won by Fulham, which is interesting. Where are the Premier League teams in it? Oh no, because they're not league teams, are they? I'm such an idiot. So Fulham have actually won this, which, given they won the Championship, is a nice double for them. It'll be interesting to see if they win it the following year as well. But that is probably all we need to look at in this first season. The next one could be more interesting, given that they're going to be in the Champions League, Hereford, York, Chester and Boston. So let's go forward one more year and see how they're getting on. Well, it's perhaps no major surprise that Leeds United have won the Premier League. Leeds fans might be happy to see that. Fulham and Swansea, again, no surprise that they've taken up the next best places. Leeds and Fulham only losing one game each. Swansea and then Leeds to Fulham. Fulham only losing to Swansea there. But Southport are the team that managed to take the fourth Champions League spot, with Kidderminster Harriers in fifth, taking the Europa League spot, and then Darlington going into the new Euro Cup 2 teams getting relegated: Chester, Bradford and Leamington. Didn't Chester qualify for the Champions League last season? That is quite the fall from grace for them. If we look at the transfer screen, you can see Leeds dominating just about everything in the ratings. But if we look at the transfer records for last season, actually no, oh no, there we go. Don't know why that didn't show up. But you can see it's Manchester City still making the biggest signings, taking Joe Rodon for way more money than he's worth. I'm not sure I understand that transfer policy. That's £100 million spent on players that are not worth anywhere near £100 million. But Mason Mount going from Chelsea to Swansea, I'm pretty sure we saw that last season. Leeds United picking up quite a few players for nearly £100 million. They're trying to make that jump. You can see Eric Lamela has left Spurs to go to Leeds. Patrick Bamford going from Leeds to Nice. But not too many surprises, not a huge amount of money. It's Leeds and Fulham and Swansea spending the money, and then Guiseley spending £1.4 million to sign Eric Lykaj from Hull City. But after that, there's just not much money. Hereford spending a small amount as their Premier League champions. So they must have had a huge amount of money. You can see their reputation a little bit better. They can't quite keep up with the huge jump up here to the Premier League. With Gary Rowett in charge of the team here at Hereford. But they just don't have the kind of team they need. If we look at their value here, still not got a player worth over £500,000. That's why they're really going to struggle here, because they don't spend the money. Even when they win it through the Premier League, they're just not spending that money. And they're currently at Molineux in order to meet their obligations for various different things. So interesting that, that's kind of worked out how we thought, but it's interesting that Chester and Hereford really struggling. Well, Hereford not massively struggling, but not doing as well as they did the year before and not spending that money. Championship, if we look at the table here, you can see Birmingham, Stoke and Huddersfield teams going up, and no surprise that Gateshead, Gloucester and Curzon Ashton all getting a second consecutive relegation. And then if we drop down to the National League here and have a look at the stages, you can see Liverpool actually won the title this time. 1 defeat in 46 games. 1 defeat for Man City as well. They lost to Harrogate Town. Amazing that they lost to Harrogate Town. Liverpool lost to Man City. What a blow for City to lose that game. But even if they'd won it, they would not have taken the title because of their 3 draws, including against Dover and Woking. But a huge number of wins, a good goal difference. Both teams getting over 100 in their goal difference. Only 10 goals conceded. And they have flown to league football now. If we have a look at their transfers last season, I don't know why that's not loading up first time, but you can see Bernardo Silva has lots of players leaving. This is where it starts to get a little bit tasty. So you can see Bernardo Silva's gone to PSG. Raheem Sterling's gone to Barcelona. Gabriel Jesus going to Chelsea. Laporte going to Atletico Madrid. Trent Alexander-Arnold just making the switch between the teams. But then Phil Foden, Sane, Stones, Cancelo and Aguero have all left Manchester City. This is surely going to do them some damage. Interesting they're going to the likes of Chelsea, though, who are still down in the next league. And Riyad Mahrez, Angelino going, Adara Bioyo going. Liverpool actually bringing players in, not massive signings, but they are bringing players in. City have signed a few: Christian Pulisic, Jamie Shackleton, and obviously Trent Alexander-Arnold. But this is going to be a very interesting squad at this point. You can see the valuation of it now. There's still quite a few players worth over 30 million, but nowhere near as many as you would like, and it does include the likes of Joe Rondon in there. And then the team starts to look a bit shaky after that. So quite interesting what they've gone for there. Clearly turning over the club a little bit. They've still got that huge reputation, but maybe they're trying to get their wage budget down. Still got Pep in charge of the team. Liverpool, if we have a look at them, still got Klopp in charge. He hasn't been lured away yet. And they've still got most of their strength in their team. They haven't quite had the huge outflow of players that Manchester City have had. So interesting the way that's working out. City getting so many players off their books. But if we go down to the National League North, we can see there has been a little bit of a rebalance here. They've split the teams across the 2 divisions, but they've still got Arsenal and Chelsea in here. But you can see Arsenal did finish as champions, 1 point clear of Manchester United, who did also get promoted through the playoffs. Chelsea, Bournemouth in 4th is interesting, Spurs in 5th, but no Premier League teams getting relegated just yet. in Vanarama National League South, Brighton and Southampton have managed to take the promotion rights here. So it'll be interesting to see if they can get up quickly, because they've managed to get promoted before the likes of Spurs. So that will be one to keep an eye on. It's quite an odd little rebalance that though. And if we go down and look at the transfers in the National League North, you can see Harry Kane gone to PSG, 94 million. Chelsea losing a lot of players here. Kovacic, Morata, Mount and Reece James going as well. No teams signing players for a huge amount of money, but Manchester United have brought a few players in, but not quite the wholesale changes that we saw with Manchester City. Now, if we go and have a look at the Champions League, I want to see how the newly promoted teams got on in their group stage. So if we go back and have a look at this group stage, I'm just going to look at the bottom here. You can see Chester finished in 4th place, did not get a Champions League win. Boston United finished in 4th place, did not even score a goal. Did Chester score a goal? Chester did get a goal. They got one against Atletico Madrid. That's nice. Boston bottom of the group. Hereford bottom of the group without goals, 17 conceded. So maybe not a shock the way that worked out. Manchester United though did get through to the knockout stages, and if we have a look at that first knockout round, they then went out to Atletico Madrid. So there you go. No Premier League team in the Champions League now. If we look at the Europa League semi-final, you can see Arsenal managed to make it to the semis, but couldn't win, and the final went to Lyon. So no big English teams in the Champions League next season. Having a quick look again at the FA Cup, which is here. Manchester City win the FA Cup this time, a 1-0 win over Liverpool, so they will be in the Europa League next season. The Carabao Cup going to Leeds. They've done the League and Cup double, which means that they that's why there was that 5th Europa League spot or 5th place spot for the Europa League in the Premier League table. So that is probably everything for this year. One thing I do want to have a look at is the England national team and just see if they have changed their squad up at all. If we look at their national team senior squad, have they got any major surprises in here? It looks like they're still picking the same old players. Nobody new in there that you wouldn't expect. So that hasn't had an impact on the team that they're picking, the fact that they're playing way down the leagues. But again, all of that probably due to the reputation of the different clubs. So I think that will probably be it for today's episode. A little short one, but mainly because I want to get your questions down below or suggestions for what I should show in the second part. I'm planning to go about 50 years into the future here, so we will go very far forward very quickly, and I don't want to miss out on key things that you'll only be able to see this early on. So do let me know down in the comments what you'd like to see in the next part. Make sure to subscribe for that next part, which should be out tomorrow. But until next time, see ya.